did a glute workout today and it sucked so bad. I'm just not flexible, Melissa.
That's okay.
Yeah, the hip thrusts. They look so weird when you're in the gym doing them because everybody's like, what is that man doing?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Melissa, Common Sense Medicine, we are doing another episode, and this time we're focusing on exercise.
Yes, more exercise. I feel like we talk about it a lot, but it's necessary.
Absolutely. And I think the more research we do on it, the more we realize there is no short. It is the ultimate longevity drug.
Oh, yeah. There's no way around it. You know, if you want to feel good right now and feel good as you age, you can't skip it.
Correct. Yeah. So today we'll be talking about obviously the importance of exercise, why we need to do exercise, but then we're actually going to get a little bit in the nitty gritty of like, okay, if we can break exercise into three main components, what kind of exercise do we need to do? So we're going to help our listeners not just like be generic like exercise, but like give you some maybe ideas about what to focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just talk about it here, Melissa. Number one, why do we need to exercise?
There are so many reasons. But one, just kind of, I guess just like the most obvious thing is like we don't move enough during our day.
Exactly.
Whereas, years ago, really, our lifestyles were just so much more active that people didn't have to exercise, but the human body is made to move because we're made to provide for ourselves, whether it's our food or shelter or things like that. So, in all of mankind history, we were doing that for ourselves, and now a lot of that's done for us. And we don't move enough anymore. So we really have to incorporate it somewhere. And most of the time, we need that additional exercise. Now, we have a whole nother episode on the non-exercise activity, which is another layer of that. But this little bit more vigorous activity or things that affect our balance and strength, those are in addition.
Exactly. Yeah. So we already talked about the last time about this thing called non-exercise activity time. And you could say that in that episode, we brought up a lot of what other countries are doing, which is they move more than we do. So even if they don't go to the gym, they seem to be doing better from a lifespan, health span, which we talked about last time. They're just doing better than we are. And one thing is the fact that, like you said, we just don't move. So our genetics haven't changed. Our genetics haven't changed for forever. But our environment has drastically changed. Even when we were growing up, Melissa, I just remember my parents would take us to the store. We walk around, Walmart for an hour and a half. We just Walmart delivery now.
Yeah. That was a lot of activity. Yeah. Getting kicked out of the house during the summer,
Oh my gosh.
And now kids like stay in from the heat and, play on their video games. I guess who can blame them? But at the same time, that's a lot of physical activity that we miss out on.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Melissa, I'll just tell you this funny story. This week, I drank out of the hose because we're out there building a trampoline, dying of a heat stroke. And I was drinking from the hose, and my kids were just like, Dad, are you going to die? Can you do that? I was like,
That's how we survive.
Girl, yeah. My parents would even let us back in the house to drink water. We'd drink from the hose outside. Or even just, we would love to play so much, we wouldn't want to just go inside.
Right. Yeah, it's just right there.
Yeah.
And you're probably playing in the sprinklers anyway.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Shoot, girl, we'd be peeing outside. going into the bathroom. Pee outside. But exactly. So the need to move, the body is designed to move. And I think we've said this before, our body is the ultimate use it or lose it type of body. So we move, we stay active, the body will adapt and get better. We don't move, we sit, we won't.
Right.
Yeah, and I was looking at a statistic the other day. It said that the average American gets about 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day, which is about, and that's in a 24-hour period, which is about a mile and a half, which for most people, if they walk slow, it's like an hour. So that means the other 23, we're just sitting there.
Right.
And then compare that to when we were farmers or hunter-gatherers. I mean, we would walk 20,000 steps, 30,000 steps for 8 hours a day.
Yeah. At least sun up to sundown, just constant physical activity, and some of it vigorous, like if you were picking up, carrying, all kinds of different, labor that we just don't do anymore.
Exactly. So with all that being said, no shortcut, full stop. The ultimate longevity, quality of life thing is exercise.
Right. And we haven't mentioned anything about weight maintenance. You know, a lot of times people think of exercise only if they want to lose weight. So if they're at a healthy weight, they haven't been exercising, they don't really feel the need to, or maybe they aren't at a healthy weight, but don't really, aren't really ready to change that. They don't really think about exercise until they're ready to make a change with that. But there are so many other benefits to exercise that if for no other reason, weight doesn't have to be even part of the equation. We can talk about how it can improve, your brain health, your focus, decrease risk of certain types of dementia, certain types of cancer, improves musculoskeletal pain. If you have aching joints, the best thing for those joints is to exercise. So there's all different reasons that aren't tied to how much we weigh.
That's perfect, Melissa. Because as we want to look good. Don't get me wrong. Yes, and if you want to exercise, you want to have a certain body shape or body type, great. But you're exactly right. Irrespective of the weight loss that can happen with exercise, the big thing is, dementia. And we'll bring this up probably a couple of episodes down the road about mental decline. It's a big problem. And we hear people all the time. They're like, I don't want to live to 100 if I'm not me anymore at like 80. That's an important thing, but most people don't realize that, okay, to stop the dementia, you start with exercise now, right? You start with nutrition now. And so exercise plays such a big role. I think another one, sleep. If you can't sleep, maybe it's because you're not active enough. If we're active, we burn that nervous stress energy off, we actually sleep better.
Yeah, definitely. And exercising earlier in the day too can really help with our sleep patterns. It's that like natural circadian rhythm that again, we've thrived on for all of mankind, that waking up with the sun, getting moving early in the day, and then we sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, Melissa, let's kind of break it down then. So I look at exercise from a health aging standpoint in 3 big categories. Number 1 is strength. Number 2 is cardiovascular endurance. And number 3 is stability.
Yes, and we need all 3.
Yeah, so gym bros that look like little chicken legs.
You still need to go for a walk.
That's right.
And you still need to balance.
Yeah. Okay, so let's actually start with strength training. Okay, so when we say strength training, can't talk. What we're talking about is not like how much can you bench or how much can you squat, but rather functional things. Okay, so like for example, this I guess past 2 days, we were building a trampoline, which I know the FedEx guy hates. Like, who ordered this trampoline? Okay, so the things that we had to do to take it to the backyard, we had to squat, we had to lift, we had to carry, we had to move back, we had to carry some more, and we had to use our hands and put things.
Those springs.
Oh my God, pull! Yes, pulling. Lord have mercy. That's a bicep workout. Never did I bench press 300 pounds with it.
Yeah. Well, and if you are bench pressing 300 pounds, fine.
Good for you.
Yeah, you're building muscle. But you also don't have to get to the point where you're benching 300 pounds to be like healthy and strong. If you're using smaller weights or body resistance or bands or things like that to train your body for those tasks, great. You're putting some resistance in there and that builds strength.
Exactly. Yeah. And we say things like, part of strength training is to be strong for the future so you can do things that you want to do. So guess what you want to do? You want to pick up your grandkids? I'll tell you right now, my 4-year-old's like 30 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And to squat down and pick, that's like a goblet squat. So if you, for people who don't know goblet squat, Melissa will do a goblet squat tomorrow on our photos. It's essentially squatting down and lifting, right? And so one big part of strength training, I think, just looking at our daily motion and activity is you do have to strengthen these hips and these thighs, right? Because when you lift your child, when people hurt their back, it's because their butt and their thighs and their quads are weak. And so strength training, focusing on that for the sake of quality of life is kind of what we're talking about.
Right. And we start to lose our muscle around age 30. It starts earlier than people realize. It's harder to maintain. And if we're not doing those things, no wonder we get injured more often at 40 or at 60 than we did at 20 or 10. You know, at those younger years, we can get away with like randomly helping a friend move and our back won't even hurt the next day.
Yeah.
But at 40 even, you know, moving boxes all day, we're not, you know, we're going to be in
Yes, don't
barely rolling out of bed the next morning. You know, we're going to be sore. And that is just kind of that natural progression of you know, muscle loss, but there is a way to maintain it or at least build on what we still have. And that's through strength or resistance training.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is kind of a good place to put that plug in, Melissa. The biggest probably danger for weight training at our age, which we're still young, but at our age group, is injury. You know, a lot of people, if they lift too heavy or they lift awkwardly or they don't have their form right or they have you know, B2, ego in the gym, right? You're trying to lift weights you have no business lifting. Once people get injured, a lot of them never go back to exercise.
Right.
So that is a big key. We would rather you lift lighter, make sure your form is right before even for the sake of injury. And we're talking about shoulders, backs. And how many patients do we see, Melissa, where they tweak their shoulder, they tweak their back, they need surgery, and they're out for like a year and a half?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, lots of bulging discs or herniated discs or things like that from, you know, overdoing it or, you know, doing like a crazy amount of like snatching or deadlifting or things like that their body maybe wasn't ready for. So yeah, you know, starting where you're at, increasing gradually, and just knowing like you don't have to get to the point where you're at 300 pounds, you know,
Correct.
on the bench or whatever it is, but just having some of that progressive overload, but just very like small increments, so, you know, to help prevent injury.
Yeah, and sometimes it might be helpful even to, and I always make fun of people that video themselves in the gym. But even if you're at home and you're lifting, it's not a bad idea to kind of video because a lot of times I think I have a certain form. And when I look at myself, like I don't look at myself, but my wife will be like, you look nothing like that woman on that TV. Like, especially with yoga. I'm like, down dog. And she's like, that's like a U and not a V. You know, and so it's good to kind of see where you are.
Yeah, and that's why there's mirrors all over gyms. It's not like purely for vanity. It's actually to check your form. It's to see. And if you are on rep 10 and you're going for 12, but by 10, your form is all like loosey-goosey and you're like leaning to try to compensate or whatever, maybe you need to stop at 10 that time.
Exactly.
And maybe next time shoot for 12 or your next rep, lower your weight and go for 12, you know, but your body sends you cues when you're overdoing it. And as soon as you start to strain like that, you know, you're increasing risk of injury.
Exactly. Which I think will bring us to our second point then is actually stability. So stability, I don't mean like, you know, like I can stand here and do a one leg, but what we're talking about is core strength, range of motion, flexibility, and form. Right. So most of the time, even like on a simple squat, like, so, you know, it's interesting watching my children, they can squat all the way down with their butt on the ground, both feet flat and just sit there, you know, and it's so like, and it's like a baby. You're like, that my baby can do that. But me, the moment we get past 90 degrees on our hips, you feel unstable, you start shaking. And essentially what happens is your body starts to cheat. Right. So it leans, it pulls, it does all sorts of different things because that's just what it's been doing for decades since we were kids. Now with stability, I think the big point here is we don't want to fall, right? We don't want to bust it. I mean, I would say at least once a day, once a week or twice a week, especially in my old clinic when I was seeing a lot more urgent stuff, someone would come in because they fell, right? They misstepped, they fell upstairs, they fell downstairs. And the reason is, okay, our stability and our cheating is fine 80% of the time. But the moment we either have a weight, we change our speed, or we have something that was unexpected. We didn't expect that step to go so low. We didn't expect that step to be so high. That cheating, that thing, it just doesn't catch up, right? And so we bust it. And so stability training is so important. And this includes things like yoga, Pilates, a lot of body weight things, a lot of unilateral things, one-legged things that focus more on form than weight training. This is so crucial because it affects everything else.
Right. And it teaches your body how to know where parts of your body are in time and space, that proprioception, you know, so you can be doing a yoga pose and know where your feet are without looking down. Or when you're shifting weight from one foot to the other, you can do that without checking yourself. You know, it's kind of it's training that mind-body connection even more. But you can incorporate stuff like that every day.
Absolutely.
Like I'll tell people to put their shoes on standing up, their socks and shoes. So you shift your weight to one foot, lift your other, put your sock on, and then switch sides, do the same thing instead of like sitting down and putting shoes and socks on. It's little things like that people don't even think about. They're like, yeah, I sit in a chair and I just put them on. But if you do it standing up, you'll kind of train some of that, even just in a regular day without, you know, setting aside time for yoga or something.
Yeah,
so.
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. And this type of training does a great job protecting your back, which really is another one. I mean, how many times we see back pain a week, Melissa? It is constant. And a lot of it comes from, obviously, you know, yes, if you go to the gym, you lift too heavy, you can tweak your back. But a lot of it, people are like, I dropped my toothbrush. I bent over to grab it and my back went out.
Yes, or I slept wrong. Yeah, all the time.
Yes.
And that's still, isn't it still the number one reason for a primary care visit?
It is.
Yeah, like forever. It's always been back pain.
Exactly. Yeah, back pain is by far like the biggest spender. And so with that being said, it has so much to do with stability and flexibility, right? If our hamstrings are not loose and they're tight, when we lift, we actually lift more with low back than hamstring. And so the low back is not designed to do that. Plus, we sit all day long. And so when we sit, you know, that affects a lot of the strength and low back, and then it affects our stability. So even little tips, like you said, standing up on one leg to do things, standing up at work.
Yeah.
You know,
just standing.
Yeah. It's like we're going back to the basics.
It does. And it engages our core differently, not only the low back, the hamstrings, the glutes, but the front part of the core as well. Your hip flexors, your abdominal muscles, all those things work together to support your spine. And if one is imbalanced, like it will be if we're sitting all day, just standing up can start to activate different areas of that muscle chain.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to put it in like an exercise thing. So if you want to try this to see how your stability is, one thing I found that does really good is box step up. All right. So yeah. Now, or a chair. Now you better get a stable chair. Don't get a swirly chair. Right. But if you have to raise your foot or where your hip is 90 degrees and you step up onto a chair with weights, no weights, doesn't matter. You can assess your balance. You can assess the strength of your butt. Are you pushing with your butt and your low back? Are you pushing with your thigh or your knee? Because the knees get hurt because the back is hurt, because our alignment's off, you know? And sometimes doing it on the other side, you can even tell the difference between one side's a lot easier, one side's a lot harder. And when it's harder, that just tells us like, okay, we need more stretching. We need more balance training. Maybe in the gym, instead of doing like a 2-legged deadlift, try using lighter weights and do 1-legged, you know, or in yoga, I think it's yoga. They have good mornings where you're just standing like straight and then you hinge at your hip and you stand back up, and keeping your back flat. These are things that you can do at home, do it on your own, that can really assess how stable you are.
Yeah. And if you find that you're not stable, incorporating those things into your routine can be really helpful.
Exactly. So let's move on to the next one, Melissa. And this is cardiovascular endurance. Now, I like to break this into 2 points because of Disney. Right? So there is the brisk walk,
Yeah.
right? So you're walking in the park and you're just like looking at things and you're trying to, move around the crowds. And then you look at your watch or your phone. You're like, oh no, our fast pass is over there and it's in 10 minutes. And then you sprint, all right? Or the airport, right? You're walking and then you're like, gate moved. And you're like, no. And you're like running across. So usually cardiovascular endurance is a mixture of walking and then fast movements. And believe it or not, even now we stink at walking because we just don't walk enough.
We don't walk enough. Walking should be something that you could go out and do at any time. Like
Correct.
just go walk a mile, just strolling around your neighborhood or whatever. But for a lot of people, that's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
But at very baseline, that should be something we can do.
Exactly. That is what our body's built to do.
Yeah.
Baseline is just like you said, hey, we have to walk to the, I guess back in the day, yeah, I got to walk to the store. It's a mile away. No worries. Just boop, walk over there and walk back.
Yeah.
And that's what the rest of the world does.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Walking around your acre of land to tend to the garden or the animals or things like that. It's just a lot of walking. They didn't ride their four-wheelers to the back of their pasture.
That's right.
It was you walk to get there and check on the cow, all those things that we just can't relate to in our current time.
No. So exactly. So, and I guess with walking, what we're talking about here is, well, some people will say zone 2 activity, right? So zone 2 activity, if you have a smartwatch, that's kind of heart rate between 100 and 120. If you don't, you can tell you're in zone 2 because when you're walking at this pace, you want to talk, but you really don't want to at the same time. Like you could have a conversation, but you are not really interested in because you're trying to get that pace up.
Yeah. Or your conversation would be a little bit breathy, you'll have to like pause to take a breath, things like that. So that's kind of a good judge, that your heart rate's up enough and that you're putting out that steady effort.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, I usually recommend everybody, like you should at least walk like this 30 minutes a day. And you can make it fun. You can make it the evening stroll with the family, although it was chaotic.
It's like a zoo.
It's a zoo, yeah. But like things like that, or early in the morning, it's beautiful outside. It's not too hot. Go out there and walk, and you can even improve, right? So you can see how fast it took to walk here, this distance. Next time you walk a little farther, next time you walk a little faster. This is something that needs to be in everybody's toolbox. Everybody needs to be able to walk.
Yeah, and you can break that up through your day. If your goal is 30 minutes a day, do 10 minutes at lunch, 10 minutes at the end of the day, or 10 minutes before work, however you want to break it up, just do that. And it's still beneficial. Anything as small as 10 minutes counts.
Yeah.
But overall average, want to get up there to, around that 30 minutes.
Yeah. And then for the sprinting part, you don't have to sprint. Most people can't sprint really well, but because you got to work up to that. But even just doing jumping jacks, something that this is zone 3, zone 4. This is when you're raising your heart rate up to like 140, 150, 160. Now you're sweating. Now you're not talking. Now you're huffing and puffing. I recommend that like 30 minutes total a week at least.
Yeah. And that can be incorporated into your other workouts even, if you do just take like a little, faster spurt here or there, doing some jump rope in between sets or jumping jacks if you don't jump rope, different things like that between your strength training or whatever, just kind of incorporating that where you can fit it in.
Yeah. And again, this is things that you can do, guess what, with Netflix on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You can do jumping jacks. You can do push-ups at a pace where you can't catch your breath. You don't have to go to a gym to do things like this.
You don't have to go to HIIT class. If you like that kind of thing, go, or a spin class or whatever. Do that a couple times a week. But if you aren't really into that, just fit it in other ways.
Exactly. So to wrap everything up, Melissa, we have talked about exercise as the holy grail. Like this is something that I'm sorry, I know if you don't want to do, you've got to do it. If you want to live a nice, long, high quality, high health span and lifespan kind of life, exercise is something that you cannot skip. It's broken into 3 big components, right? Strength training, which we're not talking about like Mr. Olympia strength training, but just being strong to do things that you want to do. We talked about stability. So this is your core. This is your balance. This is the things that prevent injury. This is the things that help you not fall. We talked about cardiovascular endurance, and the two kinds, the ones that you can, the long distance endurance, and then the short bursts. And I actually want to wrap this up with essentially these things. The big movements that I think are important that we have to master: squatting, right? So going down with your knees, getting back up. Hinging. So hinging is like deadlift. Hinging is like you bend at the hip, and you can pick something up. And carrying. So, right, like we said, I mean, I was carrying a trampoline, you're lifting, and that incorporates grip strength. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of good studies looking at grip strength in correlation to longevity. So the better the grip strength, which usually is like a hint that, hey, you're pretty active.
Yeah.
The longer your life is.
Yeah. And that can, you don't have to have like a grip strength training. I mean, I feel my grip strength, like when I'm doing a lot of that strength training stuff you just mentioned, just the act of holding those heavier weights while I'm doing squats or whatever, your grip, your forearms, all of that fatigues. And it definitely changes over time.
Yeah, exactly. So any last words do you want to say, Melissa?
I think just start where you're at and add some of these things into your routine. This is one of those things. It's kind of one of those conversations that's sometimes hard to have because, we'll sit with people all the time and, discuss these things. And a lot of times there's always some underlying reason that you can't. It's time, it's motivation, it's my knees hurt, so I can't do it. But exercise makes all those things better, and we can't wait for motivation to do it. We just have to do it. Sorry, coming in hot today.
That's. I think when people hear that, it's great. And we have yoga classes at our clinic. We are talking about a rucking class. Yeah. So maybe going to so rucking is like walking with a backpack on. So it's nothing fancy. It just sounds really cool. But these are just things that we want to teach patients to do because we know that in the long run, yes, it might not pay off tomorrow, but in 6 months, in 8 months, in a year, you will feel different. Your quality of life will be better. And so we would love to be able to bring this to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, you know what? I think next week, let's talk about neurocognition. Okay. Because, we talked about heart attacks, strokes, we talked about cancers, which we probably will have an episode talking about cancer prevention. But cognitive decline is such a big problem that most of us might not address till we're like 60 or 70 when it's a little too late. We got to start addressing it earlier.
Yeah, right now.
All right. Well, thanks, Melissa.
All right.